He walked down the same familiar road with a single bag in his hand. But everything felt different. The trees were the same. The dust on the path was the same. But the air did not recognize him anymore. His name was Rashid Halim, and after 10 long years, he had returned to the village he once called home. For the people here, life had moved forward without him. They had learned to stop remembering. They had learned to live as if he never existed. Rashid stopped in front of an old gate, staring at a house that was his on paper, his in memory, but now looked like it belonged to someone else. The wooden porch leaned to one side. Tall grass covered the yard. The fence was broken, with pieces missing like teeth. Wind pushed dried leaves across the ground as if the house itself was sighing. 8 years ago his mother had lived here. She would stand at the doorway whenever he visited, wiping her hands on her apron, waiting for him to walk from the gate. She never said much, but her presence was always enough. Now she was gone. She had died 4 years earlier, in the middle of winter. Rashid had received the news through a short letter sent weeks after the funeral. Your mother passed away. We buried her beside your father. The house has been empty since. He never replied. What could he have said? He pushed the gate open. The hinges screamed loudly, and somewhere nearby, a dog began barking. Rashid walked through the wet grass, his shoes soaking with morning dew. He found the key under the same old porch board, exactly where his mother always kept it. The metal was cold and rusted. The door opened with difficulty. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and dust. It was dark. He pulled a curtain aside, and sunlight flooded the room, revealing dancing particles of dirt in the air. Everything was still there. The worn sofa, the cracked television, old-frame photographs on the wall. A young Rashid, his mother smiling, a father he barely remembered. In the kitchen, the cold felt deeper. A cup sat on the table next to a spoon, as if someone had just stepped away. Rashid turned on the faucet. At first, only air came out, then dirty brown water. Finally, something clear enough to wash his face. He looked out the window. Across the yard, an elderly woman, Nina Begum, was hanging laundry. She noticed him. Her hands froze. Rashid raised his hand slightly, a silent greeting. She stared for a moment longer, then turned away and disappeared into her house, leaving the laundry unfinished. Rashid lowered his hand slowly. That was when he understood. He had returned home, but the village had not welcomed him back. That evening, Rashid sat on the porch with a cigarette between his fingers. The smoke rose into the quiet sky, disappearing into the fading sunset. The village was settling into its normal rhythm. Doors closed. Cows were brought into sheds. Dogs barked across the streets like they were warning each other. Rashid stared at the empty road, thinking of tomorrow. He would go to the local office, register his return, and find work. Something simple. A guard, a cleaner, anything that paid enough to survive. He wasn't looking for friendship. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. He only wanted peace. But peace was not something the village was willing to give. A man passed by carrying 2 buckets of water. He slowed down when he saw Rashid. The man stared for a long time, expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he walked away. Rashid crushed the cigarette under his shoe. The next morning, he woke up at exactly 6. Prison habits never left the body. No one had called him. No alarm rang, but his eyes opened like they always had behind bars. He stepped outside and began cleaning the yard. He found an old rusted sickle in the shed and started cutting the wild grass. His movements were slow, careful, almost mechanical. After an hour, a voice came from the gate. Back again? Rashid looked up. Nina Begum stood there, arms crossed. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Yes, Rashid answered. She nodded slightly. Your mother cried a lot before she died. Rashid said nothing. His grip tightened on the sickle. Nina's eyes narrowed. You staying for good? This is my house. Nina gave a cold smile. A house, yes. But is it still your place? Then she turned and walked away. By afternoon, 2 teenage boys passed near the gate. They slowed down when they noticed him. One whispered loudly, not caring if Rashid heard. That's him. The other boy stared, the one who killed someone. Rashid remained still. One of them stepped closer. Is it true you murdered a man? Rashid's eyes lifted slowly. His stare was heavy enough to silence the air. "Go home," Rashid said quietly. The boys hesitated. Then they turned away, laughing nervously. Behind them, Rashid heard the words that followed him like a curse. "Killer." That night, Rashid walked to the only small shop in the village. The woman behind the counter looked up, and her face hardened. "What do you want?" "Bread, rice, tea." She placed the items down without warmth. As Rashid paid, she finally spoke again. "You should not have come back." Rashid froze. "This is my home." The woman shook her head. "Not anymore. Houses don't decide that. People do." Rashid left the shop under the darkening sky, and with every step, the village felt colder. A week passed. Rashid searched for work everywhere. At the sawmill, they claimed there were no openings, though a hiring sign hung clearly at the entrance. At the farm, the manager refused to meet his eyes. "You're not suitable." No explanations, no second chances. Finally, the only job left was at the village cemetery, a place for the forgotten. It seemed fitting. They hired him as a night watchman. The pay was small but enough. A tiny room beside the graveyard was given to him. One bed, one stove, one table. Rashid moved his belongings there, leaving his mother's house empty again. The cemetery was quiet. No judging faces, no whispers, only silence and stone. Most villagers avoided him even there. They came on weekends, placed flowers, and walked away without looking at him. One afternoon, an old woman arrived, leaning on a cane. Her back was bent with age. Rashid stepped forward. "Do you need help carrying those?" She looked up slowly. Her eyes were tired, not angry. "You're him." Rashid blinked. "I'm the caretaker." "No, you're the one who killed my son." The world stopped. Rashid's throat tightened. The woman didn't scream. She didn't curse. She only spoke with deep exhaustion. "My boy is under this earth, and you are still breathing." Rashid lowered his head. "I'm sorry," she repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "Sorry doesn't bring anyone back." She took her flowers and walked away, disappearing among the graves. That night, Rashid sat alone, staring out the window. The gravestones looked like shadows in the moonlight. He thought about guilt, about punishment, about how prison ends. But judgment never does. 2 months passed. Rashid settled into routine. Wake early, sweep leaves, repair broken fences, light the stove at night. The cemetery became his world. Until one evening, a knock came at his door. Rashid opened it. A teenage boy stood there, shivering, thin pale eyes red from crying. "Excuse me." Rashid studied him. "Yes? Can I sit here for a while? Just to warm up?" Rashid hesitated. "What's your name?" "Samir." "Why aren't you home?" Samir looked down. "I don't like it there." Rashid stepped aside. "Come in." The boy entered, holding his hands near the fire. For the first time in years, Rashid felt like his presence mattered to someone, even just a little. Samir began visiting often. Sometimes he came to do homework. Sometimes he came just to sit in silence. Rashid never asked too many questions. He understood quiet suffering. One evening, Samir arrived with a split lip. Rashid noticed immediately. He said nothing. He simply handed the boy a wet cloth. Samir pressed it to his mouth. After a long pause, he whispered, "My stepfather." Rashid's jaw tightened. "He drinks," Samir continued. "Then he becomes someone else." Rashid stared into the fire. "You should call the police." Samir gave a bitter laugh. "They come. They leave. And then it gets worse." Rashid knew that truth too well. Some systems protected paper, not people. 1 week later, Rashid was called into the village office. The headman sat behind his desk. Beside him stood the local officer, face stern. "We've heard," the officer said, "that a boy has been coming to you." Rashid remained calm. "He comes for warmth, for quiet." The officer leaned forward. "You were convicted of manslaughter. You are not someone villagers trust." Rashid's hands curled into fists under the table. "The boy is in danger." "That is not your concern," the officer snapped. The boy's stepfather filed a complaint. "You will stay away from him." Rashid's voice dropped. "The man beats him." "Not your business," the officer repeated sharply. "This is a warning. Next time, we take action." Rashid walked back to the cemetery with heavy steps. The sky was bright, but he felt no warmth. That night, Samir knocked again. Rashid opened the door. The boy stood there with fear in his eyes. "Uncle, please." Rashid froze. The officer's words echoed in his mind. "Stay away. Do not involve yourself." But then he saw Samir's bruised hands, his trembling shoulders, a child standing at the edge of breaking. Rashid stepped forward.
"Did he hurt you again?"
Samir couldn't speak. He only nodded. Rashid took a deep breath. For years, Rashid had lived as a man unwanted by society, a man judged by his worst mistake. But in that moment, he realized something. Maybe he couldn't erase the past. Maybe the village would never forgive him. But perhaps he could still choose what kind of man he would be now. Rashid opened the door wider. "Come inside," he said. Samir's eyes filled with tears. "You're not alone anymore." Outside, the village still whispered, still feared, still remembered. But inside that small room beside the graves, a broken man and a broken boy found something rare. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but a beginning. Sometimes a second chance doesn't come from others. Sometimes it begins with the one act of kindness no one expects.